This video is sponsored by Bank of Texas.
You start each day committed to pursuing better for your employees, clients, and communities.
The team at Bank of Texas shares that spirit.
We come in every day ready to fuel growth in North Texas and financial success for our clients.
Our breadth of services and advice-driven approach allows us to compete nationally.
But our deep connection to this community,
Our community, keeps us focused on being good partners.
Okay, so I married late in my playing career, and I'm actually glad the way that it worked out. So I didn't even have my children until I had retired. So it afforded me a lot of time. That a lot of men have kids when they're young and they're in the middle of their careers and they're pursuing that, and it takes away from the time that they're able to spend then with their children. Whereas for me, my dream had always been to be a professional athlete, and then when I came to Dallas and played for the Cowboys, but I always wanted to be a father as well. And to be able to begin having my children after the first part of my career was over was great. And then when I got into broadcasting, it afforded me even more time with the kids because I was home during the week, during the football season. I would only miss their Saturday activities as they began getting older. And then in the off season, I was theirs 24/7, which ended up being a real blessing because I got divorced when my girls were quite young. They were 8 and 9 years old. And so as a single father and raising them, I was able to really invest as much as possible. So I've said many times that if at the end of my life, my girls say, my father was a great father, then I feel like my life was a real success. And none of the rest of it much matters, because I believe that our legacy is not told by those who don't know us at the deepest level. I mean, I believe our legacy is told by those who know us best, and who will know us best than our kids. So it's always been real important to me, and I'm real proud of them. And we mentioned Allie Beth being here. She literally has been a grandmother to my girls. She's taken them to dinner tonight, which she does about once a month. Not as often now that they're in college, but they've had a lot of female role models, and Allie Beth is at the top of that list.
That's awesome. You know, one of my regrets is I had kids early in life, and you know, I had issues with alcohol, and I had a lot of things that I had to go through in my life to grow up. And so my adult kids, it took me a while to kind of get the dad thing figured out and for me to grow up enough to do it. And I think it's been a real blessing, like with Hunter and Kaylee and meeting Keely in my life, is to kind of get a shot to doing it right. And from the outside in, it looks like you're doing it right. I just have been really impressed with it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. It means a lot.
Okay, so now the workout routine. I mean, I don't know anybody your age that's in better shape than you are. And I know, in the summers, we work out some together in the morning. And you are as committed to it as anybody I've met. I actually care about my exercise routine a lot because it's going fast, and I'm trying to stay as young as I can. But drink water. I think what you watch, what you eat. Tell me what your theory is.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I feel the same way about you because I know how important it is to you, and I watch it, and I admire people who do take their health and wellness seriously. And I always have, of course, as a lifelong athlete. It's obviously important if you're going to be able to make it to the professional ranks as an athlete to take care of your body. But when I began, I feel like I've gotten a bit obsessive and a bit extreme. I feel amazing. It is the best I've ever felt. Babe Laufenberg reminded me years ago that when you hear people say they're in the best shape of their life, it usually means that they're old. because
I think you're right.
You don't hear 25-year-olds or 30-year-olds
Right.
saying, "Man, I'm in the best shape of my life." You know, you hear guys
Right.
like me and you that
Right.
that say that. So, but when COVID hit, I knew people were going to go one of two ways, and I just felt that it was important to me then to say, okay, I'm not then going to just let myself go and hang around the house like some others that I knew were. I was going to even try to ratchet it up a notch. And those that knew me thought, well, how can you possibly do that? So my routine, I know most everyone in here is probably on Instagram. I follow a guy, Dr. Mark Hyman, and I know people are familiar with him in the room as well. Hyman.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. I've read his books, and if he says do it, I do it. And my whole morning routine has changed. I keep adding things to it. So,
Is it true you don't take hot showers anymore?
I haven't had a hot shower in about 7 months.
So nothing but cold shower.
Nothing but cold, and I take a cold shower first thing in the morning. And then, so it starts to where, if at all possible, I will not set an alarm. So I just feel that sleep is the absolute most important thing to really get your day started the right way. And I've always, fortunately, been a really good sleeper. So I get in bed usually by 9 o'clock, lights out at 9:30.
That means you're old.
Yes, it does. And but when I get up, cold shower. I stretch. I meditate. I drink 1.5 gallons minimum of water a day. I do the intermittent fasting. I eat between the hours of about 12 and 8 o'clock.
I do that.
I just started red light therapy, which began a couple weeks ago, that I was reading a lot about that and how good that was. I do a cold plunge and a sauna every day that I'm in Dallas. Not as accessible when I'm on the road, but I do that every day. And so just trying to, like you, Bill, we're all just trying to
last as long as we can.
Stretch it out as long as we can.
Totally. So, will you go eat a cheeseburger?
No, I did have the girls. They just got back from college, and we were all together just 2 nights ago. And they asked if I would cook for them, and I said, "Yeah, absolutely, whatever you want." And they wanted burgers, which I used to avoid. I never have been a vegetarian. I've always eaten meat. I just haven't eaten much of it. But now I eat more of it just because about reading from Dr. Hyman about the importance of protein. I did make hamburgers for them. I just had the patty instead of the rest of it. But
so you'll eat a hamburger, you just won't eat a bun. No carbs.
correct. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I avoid carbs. So
Got it.
But I'm going to Italy here next week, and
Pasta.
I'll be eating a lot of carbs over
Go
there.
for it, right?
Yeah, go for
It's
it.
part of it living. You got to live, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so beer business. How does a guy, one, think about getting in the beer business and then doing it?
So I kind of feel like I've been in the beer business a little bit, because when I was in college, when I was transferring from the University of Oklahoma to UCLA, my summer job that year was at a beer distributorship in Tulsa. And so I learned a lot. I was on the trucks. I did all those things, built displays and delivered beer. And then towards the end of the summer, the owner wanted me to start hanging around with him. And then I started calling on accounts with him. And so between the two different roles, I learned a lot. Went out to UCLA, but when I came to Dallas, I became close friends with Barry and Lana Andrews, who have Andrews Distributing. And so I did a lot with their distributorship, sales meetings, things of that nature. But never did I imagine that I would get into the beer business until about 4 years ago now, I guess it was. I met my now partners, and one of them has had a career in the beer business. And he asked if it would be something that I might be interested in doing. And just to piggyback off of the health and wellness aspect of where I'm at in my life, I said, well, I do like beer, and I will drink beer from time to time. So if I were to make a beer, it would have to be consistent with where I'm at and what I drink, and that is a light beer, low calorie, low carb beer, and they were on board with that. So that was where it began, and I decided to do it more than any other reason, Bill, because I thought we could do it differently.
Yeah.
I thought we could do it better. But I've learned in my business career that it's really the people that ultimately make something successful or not.
Totally.
And I've been involved in some really great concepts, great ideas, great technology that never really went anywhere, not because of the product or the innovation, but more because of we didn't have the people to pull it off.
Totally.
Well, I knew the partners of mine could pull it off, and so I was betting on them as much as I'm betting on myself and what we made.
So was Barry a partner?
No, but I called Mike McGuire, who's Barry's son-in-law.
Got it.
And I said, I've got an opportunity to get involved in this. I think the market needs something new, something fresh. I think we can do it differently. And he was behind it. He said, I agree. And had he have been not so optimistic about it, I likely would not have gone through with it. But knowing that, okay, well, at least in North Dallas, he would be behind it as a distributor, and my relationships with some other distributors, that's how it began. Now, I will tell you, why 8 beer is different is it's low calorie, low carb, but we use 100% organic grains, and we use antioxidant hops. But the real kicker is we don't have any adjuncts or fillers, which means we don't add any corn, rice, syrup, or sugars to the beer. And we are the only widely available beer that can make claim to that. So it is the cleanest, best for you beer on the market. And as a low-calorie, low-carb beer, it has a full-bodied taste. So, I mean, it sounds like a sales pitch because I'm the owner, but if you like light beer,
Yeah.
and you like the taste of 8, there's really no reason why
Not
you
to
would
drink
ever
it.
drink
Right.
anything else, because it's the best for you beer on the market.
Right.
And
You didn't get rid of the alcohol, did you?
did not get rid of the alcohol, but it's 4.0 alcohol by volume. It's a light beer, light in alcohol, but it's done well. We launched our second year. And in the first year, we were the #1 independent growth brand across the country. And yet we were number 7 across the country, and yet we're only in Texas. We were the #1 independent beer brand growth brand in the history of Texas. So it's done really well. It's been received really well, and we're hoping that in due time we'll be moving beyond Texas and into some other states.
So the plan is to go nationwide.
Yes. Well, let me just say this. If we just stayed in Texas, you can obviously have a tremendous business just in Texas.
Yeah.
And I thought that by year's end we might be in some of the neighboring states,
Yeah.
Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arkansas. That may not happen quite as soon, but if we begin moving outside of the state of Texas, which I believe we will, then that will be a great indication that really good things are happening.
Okay, so like, were you sitting in the room, and are you the one that picked it? Like when they'd come up with 3 brews and they'd sit in the glasses. And
me and my
this is
partners,
it?
we did it. We did it by Zoom. They sent out the batches that we had.
Yeah.
We did the taste test and what we liked about this one or what we didn't like and where we wanted to go with it. And I just kept saying, hey, can we make it better for you? I mean, that was kind
awesome.
of the mandate that I had, and the results were really positive. We worked with Oregon State University. They've got a tremendous beer program in their food and science department, and those guys were experts. They were fantastic.
Okay, so I don't know if everybody here knows, but the Masters golf tournament, the previous year's winner of the Masters gets to name they have a winner's dinner every year to commemorate past winners. And every year they get to, the past winner, and it was Scotty Scheffler last year, gets to name the menu, like what they're going to eat. And 8 beer was right in the middle of it. How did you get that done?
No, well, I should just. It was not in the middle of it. No, that was.
Was that somebody?
That was basically a great job of photoshopping.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
so it wasn't there.
No.
I was amazed that you got that done.
Yeah, please too. We've gotten it in some pretty good places. We had a strong endorsement from Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, has gotten behind it. So it's been plugged pretty well. But yeah, it didn't make it to Augusta.
Okay, maybe next year.
Although we did do an activation there a year ago when we launched. But yeah, it was not at the Champions Dinner.
Okay, so tell me about Fox for ESPN. So when your contract was up, were you kind of going to be a free agent and see what came along, or did you expect to stay at Fox? What did you think was going to happen there?
Well, so the interesting thing was my contract was not up at Fox, but the year before I was signing a new agreement with Fox, and what they offered I thought was below market. And so in the negotiation, I presented three options. They were reluctant to go above where their offer was. I made three. I gave them three proposals. Gave Fox three proposals, and one was for this amount for a number of years. Another one was a little bit more or a little bit less with more years, and then the last one was I'll take their number, but then I want an option in the contract after 1 year, only after 1 year, that I had the ability then to negotiate with other networks if they wanted my services.
Right.
And the reason I did that was because I knew that Amazon was going to be coming on, and I thought that ESPN could potentially be in play, but I had no idea that I didn't know if any of those networks would be interested in me. I just thought, if there's some open seats, and that's the hard thing about this business is
there's not a lot of seats.
There's only so many, and if you're under contract, you're probably not going anywhere. So timing's real important, and so that was my last option, that I'll take your number that I think is below market, but then after 1 year, I can then shop my services, and if nobody was interested, then it was kind of like, okay, I'll be back at Fox, and so these three options presented, and and they came back, and he said they took option C. And I said, wow, I don't even know what to make of that. They're not, I didn't know what that meant. Like,
right.
Are they just okay if I leave, or they're just simply, or is it just simply they're not going to pay anything more? And so anyway, the year ends. I never had any conversations with Fox. Amazon began talking to me in the middle of the season in 2021.
And do they have the rights to talk to you whenever they want? Is there any kind of...
in this situation, they did.
Yeah, okay.
Just not typically, but...
Yeah.
So long and short of it is that Fox didn't really believe that someone would step in and make an offer that was better than the offer that I'd already signed, essentially. And Amazon was a little bit dead. They were having a hard time figuring out exactly what their booth was going to be like. They had Al Michaels locked up, and I guess part of what helped me was that Al wanted to work with me. So he was talking to Amazon, letting them know that I would be a partner that he would want to work alongside, which helped my negotiation. And then at the 11th hour, ESPN jumped in and made an offer, and I ended up going to ESPN. And what made that deal really good for me was the fact that Joe got to come along with me because...
So how did that happen? Because was he under contract too?
I kept Joe and our crew informed as to how everything was going along that last year in 2021, and I just said, hey, just so it doesn't come out of left field, there's a chance that next year I may not be back at Fox. I don't know what this is going to look like. And then when it happened, when I told Joe, I called him up and said, hey, just so you know, I've reached an agreement with ESPN. I'm going to go to Monday Night Football. He was not happy about it because we have enjoyed working together.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He couldn't understand, and I never had any conversations with Fox. I mean, Fox never came back to the table and said,
so they
okay.
never tried?
No.
No.
And the only conversation I had with my boss was when he called me to congratulate me on the ESPN contract. And so Joe was really upset about it, and he had 1 year left on his contract, and he then asked Fox he said, look, I've given you whatever it was, 27 years of my life, and I'm asking you to give me 1 year back. And they agreed.
That's awesome. Yeah.
They let him out of his contract, and then he was able to negotiate with ESPN, and we've been able to stay together. So that's been that was the best part about it.
From my perspective, you guys are the best in the business, I think, by a mile. Because, I think, and I'm not going to name names, but I think you're the most prepared announcer on TV. How much time do you spend every week prepping for a game?
I mean, it's a lot. And it's gotten more over the years. It just seems like there's more that I feel like I need to know in order for me to get to a comfort level of doing the game.
Right.
And some don't do as much, and I think it's just a matter of whatever it takes for you to get to a comfort level. But it's one of those things that I feel like if we're doing a Giants game, for instance, and there are diehard Giants fans, that it's important to me that when I'm talking about any player for them or anything about their season, that I know that team and those players as well as they do, who live and die it.
You know their names.
No,
you know the players' names.
Well, that's a low bar. I mean, yeah. I mean,
but I mean, I think that's a big deal. I mean, because you've got people coming in and out all the time. I've seen announcers say,
if you don't know the names, then you.
Well, I've seen a lot of guys go, number 59's coming in and out.
I've heard some of that.
Yeah.
But so I could be laying in bed the night before a game and say, gosh, this kicker, I don't know how far his career-long field goal is. And Joe would know that. There's things that Joe knows that I don't necessarily have to know. But me knowing that will help in my analysis then if the game comes down to the last 2 minutes, which so many of them do, as to where they've got to get in order for this team to have a chance to win the game and get into his range. And so there's a lot of little things like that. So during the season, I'll just say that, in fact, I just had this conversation with a writer. We had a conversation about something. I said, look, I know the people who really prepare in this business, and I would say that no one, and this isn't me patting myself on the back, although it'll sound like it is, there are people in our industry that work exceptionally hard. I just don't think anyone works harder than I do. I'm not saying that I work harder than everyone else.
Yeah.
I just don't think anyone works harder than me. But that's been the mantra of my life. That has been, I think, what allowed me to have success as an athlete. And you mentioned, we spoke a moment ago about working out and all that. People have asked me, why do you work out so much? Or why do you still do it? And I do it for one simple reason, that when I'm asked by anyone, young or old, what my philosophy is about success, it's that you have to put in the time, and you have to work, and you have to be disciplined, and you have to be consistent. And those are all the things that I have taught my girls. And I never thought I was the best athlete. I had some God-given ability, but I was determined to outwork everybody and be the best version of myself that I could possibly be. And I'm not the best speaker, but I've made a career in broadcasting, and it's primarily because I'm going to be more prepared than anyone else. So if I then let myself go physically, I feel it's a contradiction to what I stand for. It's hard to talk to people about putting in the work and being consistent and being disciplined if you just let yourself go.
Right.
And so to me, it's just it's just who I am. It's just part of my makeup.
Do you take a day off? Do you have a day where you don't work out at all? You don't, do you?
If I never used to. In the course of a year, I used to a lot. And
I can't do
in the
that
course
anymore.
of a year, if I took 5 days off from cardio, or that would have been a high number in a year. But as I've gotten older, I'm not able to run now. Things started really giving me some problems. So now I do the Peloton. I started walking a lot more. I found that's been really good. There are times on Sundays when I take Sundays totally off, but more times than not now, I'll get out and do a 4 or 5 mile walk on what is normally an off day, but
Yeah.
my body's thanking me for it. I know that.
I've become a walker, and I actually do think there's benefits doing it.
Yeah.
So when you were in college, and you were this great athlete, and you were studying, did you think you were going to be a professional football player, or were you thinking like maybe a CPA? Or I mean, did you have a career in mind when you were in school, being an athlete?
Well, so
for me, I knew it had to be real estate because I was not a good athlete.
Okay.
Right? So, were you just going to college to get to the pros?
Well, I'll go back a little bit. I know. I'll go back a little bit sooner. So I've said this a lot. Many of you who've heard me speak before have heard it. My father would ask me when I was as little as I can remember. He'd say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I don't remember ever answering it with anything other than I want to be a professional athlete. And he would always say, "Well, son, if you want to be a professional athlete, you're going to have to work at it and put in the time. And if you do that, if you're willing to put in the work, you can be anything you want to in life." So that was instilled in me at a young age. And I was fortunate because a lot of boys say that. A lot of kids say, hey, they want to be a professional athlete. My parents said, well, look, I mean, that's a lofty goal, but you need to – they never wanted me to sacrifice education, but they never did throw a wet blanket on my dream of being a professional athlete. I will say that there was never a moment in my life I didn't think I would be a professional athlete at some point. I just always thought it was going to be baseball. So it was late in high school before I realized I was going to go on and play football.
Were you a pitcher, or what position?
Pitcher and shortstop. I had a chance to sign with the Mets out of high school. They were looking at me as a catcher or outfielder. And the story with that is the Mets guy, the scout, he had been scouting me for a while and had been asking what it would take because I'd already signed my letter of intent to go play football at the University of Oklahoma. And they didn't want to waste a draft pick on me and then me go and play football and then they have nothing to show for the pick. So they kept asking me, what's it for you to sign if we draft you? And I had no agent. My dad started treating me like a grown man from the time I was about 6 years old. And in some ways that's really good, but in other ways you give up a lot. When you're treated like that as a young boy, you give up a lot of childhood, and I did. But I was 17 years old. I graduated. I was relatively young, and I remember I was upstairs in Oklahoma. We had a party line, and we didn't have a. People may not even know what a party line is, but
I do.
That's what we had out in the country. This scout for the Mets says, hey, we got to know what it's going to take for you to sign. And I knew I was going to go to college, but I just wanted later in life to be able to say that I got drafted. So I was putting him off. And then he finally says, what's it going to take for you to sign? And I said, $250,000, which I have no idea why I said that or how that was.
Right.
I mean, I had no idea what anything was and money-wise at that time. And it didn't come from my mom or dad. They're downstairs, having dinner. And the guy says, $250,000. Darryl Strawberry, that was their big star at the time. Darryl Strawberry doesn't even make $250,000. And I said, well, if you want me, that's what it's going to take. And he said, have a nice career at Oklahoma. And he hung up the phone.
And that was it?
That was it. And they ended up drafting a kid who, same situation as me, had signed to go to Georgia and play quarterback. And he did not go to Georgia. He signed with the Mets. And for the life of me, I can't remember his name. But he made it to the big leagues. And he had a nice career with the Mets in the major leagues. So then when I went to college and I probably, and this is easy to say because everyone in this room gets asked if you weren't doing what you were doing, what do you think you would be doing?
Yeah.
Well, I get asked that a lot. If you didn't play football, what do you think you would have done? And I say I would have been a surgeon.
A surgeon?
Yeah. Well, I mean, why not? I mean, why not say that?
Right.
Right?
Perfect.
But my sisters are both in the medical field,
Okay.
and I really did. I was interested in being an orthopedic surgeon. Whether or not I would have made it, I mean, it is anybody's guess. But
I see you more as a CPA.
No way.
So
CPA. That's
okay.
nothing against CPAs. By
No,
the way,
no.
but-
So a few years ago, I had heard. This is before I think I knew you.
You're going to pay for that comment.
Am I okay? I'm sorry. So that you had aspirations or would love an opportunity to be a general manager of a football. Do you still feel that way? Because I think the way you prepare, you'd be really good at it. Like I know a couple teams that could use a good general manager. I'm not talking about a local team. I'm talking about. I've got a team that.
I know his team's the Bears. Well, the way it comes about is when I was playing, especially when you come into the league at 22 years old, you're just trying to figure out where your locker is. You know, I mean, you don't know anything, and then as you start to have success, as we did, and then I began having success, then you start having real thoughts of your own as to how you would do things if you were making personnel decisions or hiring coaches. So I had a definitely opinions on how I would have liked to have seen things done. And in some ways, I retired from the Cowboys because I was having back issues. A lot of people think it was because of concussions. It was primarily I was having a lot of back issues and had to take a lot of injections in order to try to get on the field and play, and it just became too much. But another reason was because there were decisions that were being made by the organization that I didn't feel were in the best interest of our football team and gave us the best chance to win.
Right.
And I didn't like the fact that you work to gain some respect and have a legacy, and I felt that I was risking giving some of that back by decisions that I had no control over. So that's where a lot of my frustration came in. And so I always had this thought that that's something I'd like to do. And had I not have gotten divorced when my girls were so young, I think it's a route I may have gone. But I just felt that it would be selfish, number one, to put in that kind of time. And then ultimately, I just couldn't give up that kind of time because of being a single dad. But I had thoughts of doing it. My youngest is now just finished her sophomore year of college, and when she graduated from high school, that was the time that I could have dove into it. But I really liked my life, and now I believe the time has passed me by.
You do.
Yeah, I still think, you know, it'd
be a lot. I mean,
I want to say it's a young man's game, but in order to get where I needed to get in order to do it, a club would have to invest some time into me. And I think 2 years. I think if I jumped in and really dove in for 2 years, I'd be ready to do it. But then, you know, I'm 56 years old, and then at some point, they're looking for younger people in those type of roles, which I understand. With all that being said, when my days are winding down, I will look back and say, that's something I had done, because it's easy to say you'd be good at it. I think I'd be good at it. And it's easy to say what you would have done, but until you're in that position, you just don't know. And there's a lot of really talented GMs that haven't had the success, just like there's a lot of great coaches who went on to be head coaches who haven't had success. So it's not a foregone conclusion that I or anybody would be good at it, but I will regret not having given it a shot if it never happens, and I don't think it will happen.
I think the hardest part of that job is picking players. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, because
I mean, a lot of them, like I watch the draft. Hunter watches the draft like he knows every player he was picking, who was going to get drafted by who. But then 3 years later, you look and half of them aren't playing anymore. I mean,
Yeah, there's no science to it, especially quarterbacks. And until you have that guy, you have no chance of winning. And it's still a flip of the coin to draft a quarterback in the first round as to whether or not he's going to be good. And the other part of it for a quarterback is it's not always just because of that guy's abilities. There's so much that goes into a quarterback's success. Right. Is he in the right offense? Does he have good players around him? The coaching, there's all kinds of things that factor into it. and yet half of them go on to have really great careers, and half of them get labeled as a bust, whether that's fair or not. That's what happens.
Do you think a quarterback can get around the lack of height?
I think now more than ever, people talk about Russell Wilson and Drew Brees. Now, of course,
The Alabama guy, he's short, right? I mean,
Bryce and Bryce Young, and he's not only short, he's pretty slight from what I understand.
Yeah.
I've not met him. But the game has definitely changed from where it once was. The quarterbacks aren't getting hit as much. So it's much more favorable for those quarterbacks that are smaller in stature than before. You just took a beating, and you just couldn't. You would never run a quarterback. You would ask them not to run and then get on the ground. And now we see all kinds of quarterbacks who not only run, but don't necessarily protect themselves before they get hit.
I agree. So, like, when you retired, because you retired young, how, 32?
I was 34.
34.
I played 12 years. Now that would
12's a long season. I mean, a long career. But I remember watching you at your retirement. You looked really young to me. Of course, I'm older, but you looked young. So did anybody come after you quit? Like when you're sitting on the couch, and if they did, were they any good? Did you have a chance to win if you'd have done it?
No, it's a good question. I haven't really talked a lot about any of this pub too much. One of them I have that I'll share briefly again. But when I thought when I retired I was going to go sign with the Chargers. Norv Turner was the offensive coordinator with them. I got released. When I say I got retired, I got released by the Cowboys, and then I thought I was going to get signed by the Chargers. Instead, their general manager signed Doug Flutie. So the morning after I was released, I got a call from Norv, and he says, "You're not going to believe this, but we just signed Doug Flutie." And I said, "Well, that makes it easy. I'll just retire," because I wasn't interested really in going anywhere else. And but then later that day, I got a call from Mike Shanahan, who is the head coach of the Denver Broncos, and he said, "Troy, I just want you to know, we'd love to sign you if you're still interested in playing football." And they had just signed Brian Griese to a new contract. He was their starter at the time. And I said, "Are you wanting to sign me as the starter, or are you wanting to sign me as a backup?" And he said, "Well, we just signed Brian to be the starter." He said, "I'd love to have you come in and start off as a backup. You can always compete and see where it goes." And I said, "Mike, if it's not, I mean, no offense, but I just know where I'm at, and I know that I could play better." Right. And
than him for sure.
Was that politically correct?
Well, that's just the truth.
So I said, I'm not interested in doing that, Mike, but thank you. And what he said, which was really nice, he said, "Hey, if you want to use us, if you want to use Denver in order to better your position with another club, if you want to play, feel free to do that." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind." Well, nothing came about it, so then I retired. And then 2 years later, we're doing a game in San Diego. We're doing a Chargers game. And we'd just done a game break that Donovan McNabb had broken his leg. Yes. And we're about to go to halftime, and I get my producer gets in my ear and says, "Hey, I've got a number for you to call at halftime." And he's never done that before. He didn't tell me who. He just said, "Hey, call this number at halftime." So thought it must be important. There was no cell service in our box there at old Jack Murphy Stadium. So I stepped out. I'm on the concourse. The stadium wasn't like they are now. You're literally out amongst all the fans, and they're walking by, and they're yelling obscenities at me, "Cowboys," So I'm on the phone, and it's Andy Reid. Andy Reid answers the phone, and he says, "Hey, you know why I wanted you to call me, don't you?" And I said, "Well, Andy, I got a feeling I do, but we just announced that Donovan broke his leg. I'm doing the game. I'm in the middle of the game." And he says, "No, I know you are. I'm watching the game." So I said, "Look, I'll call you after this game. I'll call you and we'll talk about it." So anyway, I called him. I was on my way up to Santa Barbara. I was going to spend a few days up there, and I called Andy. I said, "Tell me why you think this will work." And his intentions were that I was going to start the very next Monday night against the San Francisco 49ers. And
you hadn't played in 2 years.
Hadn't played in 2 years, didn't know the offense and all that. And so that kind of made me a little bit skeptical. But I said, why do you think it'll work? And he gave me all his reasons. I said, look, I want to sleep on it. I'll call you in the morning. And he said, okay. So I called my producer and I said, tell me, because I just was in my second year of television.
Yeah.
I said, tell me why you think, or if you do, you think I may have a career in television. Do you think I'm any good at this? And then he answered it, and then I called Norv Turner, who was my offensive coordinator with the Cowboys, who was coaching in the league at the time. And I said, what do you think? And so we talked about it, and the next morning I called Andy and said, hey, I appreciate it, but it's just not going to work out. So that was kind of the end of it.
Are you glad you never went to another team?
Yeah.
I think so, too. I think it's kind of cool.
Dave Wanstedt, who coached the Bears, of course, he was with the Dolphins a year later, and he actually talked to me about coming out of retirement and playing for them. They thought they were a quarterback away from maybe winning it all, and as it turned out, they were far from that. Their offensive – they went 6-10. Their offensive line wasn't very good, and I just remember thinking, man, because I was going to do it. Their GM ultimately wouldn't sign me, but I trained that offseason like I was going to.
So would that have been 3 years after you retired?
Yeah.
Wow.
And but yeah, no, I am glad. I'm glad I can say that I only played for the Cowboys. I'm happy with the broadcasting.
Yeah.
Worked out, and I had this conversation with Jason Witten because. Jason Garrett's dad would always say you play as long as you can play, because there comes a time when you reach an age where it doesn't matter if you want to play or not play. You just physically can't do it. So as long as you want to play and you can, keep playing. And so Jason called me when he was trying to decide whether or not he was going to go into broadcasting or continue to play. And I told him kind of the same thing, that you hate to not play as long as you can play, and you still got, I don't know, another year for sure, maybe 2 more years, really good years, and maybe you win a Super Bowl, and, all that would be amazing. But these jobs don't come around very often, and you have an opportunity to get involved in this job with Monday Night Football. It's a great job with young children, and then ultimately he ended up retiring and then went into broadcasting. But had I have given up broadcasting to go play, someone else then would have stepped in, and there's no telling what might have happened when I came back. So I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
So who's been your most influential mentor in your life?
Well, business-wise, it's been Carl Westcott.
Right.
Who say prayers for him. He's not doing well right now. Athletically, I would probably say Norv Turner has been the biggest influence on me. And then my father, in kind of a strange way, he as I mentioned earlier, he was tough. He was very strict, disciplinarian. It was not an easy way to grow up, but I think that it was through raised that way that gave me the drive that I have. That I'm not certain I would have made it if I hadn't been forced to be as mentally tough as I had to be.
Right. Okay, so I'm out of time. I've got a bunch more questions, but I'm going to give you a break and stop asking them.
Okay.
Is there anybody in the crowd, maybe we get 2 questions of Troy that I haven't asked? Anybody want to ask a question? You might get a free pass here. Hunter, you don't have a question? Okay, then I'm going to ask. Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
OU to UCLA.
When I was being recruited to go to Oklahoma, it was at the time that are my age and remember it. Marcus Dupree had been at Oklahoma, and he had just left, transferred out of the university, but they were running the I formation because USC had beaten them 2 consecutive years, and they were running the I formation, and Barry Switzer had said that the wishbone offense was obsolete. They were going to get away from it, go more to a pro-style attack. And so I was the next recruiting class, and I was being recruited as a quarterback that was going to fit this pro-style offense. And yet there was a whole bunch of running backs that were being told that no, they were going to go back to the wishbone. So they had this amazing recruiting class, but it was kind of split between people who thought they were going to a pro-style offense like myself. Keith Jackson, who was the #1 receiving tight end in the nation, he signed with Oklahoma. He was in my draft class, and he thought they were going to throw the ball as well. So there was a lot of frustration on my part. I started one game as a freshman, true freshman, started as a sophomore, and then broke my leg in the 4th game of the season against the University of Miami. And Jamel Holloway, who was a true freshman, came in, who was a wishbone quarterback, led the team to the national championship. And he was at the time, it was the Big 8 conference. He was the Big 8 quarterback, Big 8 offensive player of the year as a true freshman. But the coaches were telling me, hey, spring ball, it's wide open competition. And I thought, really? I mean, this guy just won the national championship. You know, he's the Big 8 offensive player of the year. So I knew I was not going to play, and then decided to transfer. I was 19 years old, and then transferred to UCLA with the help of Barry Switzer. He called these schools. I think he felt bad. I think he knew kind of that I was in the wrong program, and then it worked out. And Terry Donahue was my there at UCLA. You mentioned who mentors are. I've been fortunate in my life. I think anyone who's had success, whether it's in real estate or whatever your profession is, you've had good mentors and good teachers, and I'm certainly the beneficiary of a lot of that. From the time I began, I had invested coaches who really knew the game, and Terry Donahue not only was an amazing coach, but I know of no one that I hold in higher regard than him, and he passed away a couple years ago as well. But my time at UCLA was well served, and met an amazing man and made some amazing teammates.
Anything else? Anybody else? One more. All right, you got one? Yeah. Fire away. That was one of my questions. That's great.
Yeah. We had gone through a stretch of games. The question was about Damar Hamlin in the Bills game that we had that Monday night against the Bengals. And we had a series of games. That's been the tough thing about Monday Night Football is when the schedule comes out, you think you've got amazing games, and then when they roll around, the teams may not be where you thought they were going to be. So we had a number of games leading up to that one that were not competitive. They weren't good teams. And it was frustrating for me because I was used to doing games for Fox that we always had the best game on Fox. So we always had compelling matchups. Well, we went into that game. We were really excited about it because it felt like a playoff game, which essentially it was with what was at stake. And the game started out great, a lot of energy in the stadium. It felt good to be calling a game like that again. And then when Damar made the hit, what initially I thought was what I'd seen, I don't want to say too many times, but I'd seen it from time to time where someone gets up, is dazed, has a head injury, and then goes to the ground. And that's what I initially thought that it was. And we don't really like to show that too much. It's not something that we feel the viewers, it's a tough moment when you see someone that's had a head injury like that. But I thought that's what it was. And then we found out rather quickly, in a matter of seconds shortly thereafter, that it was far more than simply a head injury. And what we were able to see in our booth, because we have cameras, was not what was being shown to the public. So I didn't think he was going to live, quite honestly. They were working around the table. They were administering CPR, and one would get tired, and they'd rotate around, and the next person would get in line. And this went on and on and on, and it was violent. The compressions that they were giving him to try to start his heart, and the amount of time that was passing I just said, we've not seen this. This is unprecedented. We've just never witnessed anything like this. And I don't even know how we're going to handle it. We didn't know how long we were going to be on the air, if it was going to get tossed to somebody else, because all of a sudden we became newscasters. And I say we, I don't even feel comfortable saying we, because Joe did the heavy lifting. And I told him afterwards that I've been alongside of him for 22 years, and he's called some amazing moments, and he's handled some really difficult moments with tremendous grace, but that was his finest hour. I mean, he did the heavy lifting that night, and there was no script, and there was nothing coming in. There was no real information coming in. I've gotten lumped in with the coverage of that night, and I don't deserve any credit for it, quite honestly. I mean, Joe was phenomenal. Our crew handled it exceptionally well. Lisa Salters, who did some reporting from the sidelines, she was fantastic. So then we move forward to just last week. Each network does what they call an upfront in front of advertisers to get the advertisers excited about. Disney does theirs for all their programs. ABC does one, which is obviously part of Disney, but Fox has theirs, CBS has theirs. But it's not just sports. It's all of their entertainment shows and all that. And it's to get advertisers excited that they'll pay more advertising for these programs. Joe and I, we went and presented at the ESPN up front last week in May, and they brought Damar Hamlin out on stage while we were out there, and it was the first time I'd met him. So I had not met him prior to last week, and as I told him, that could have, first of all, it's a miracle that he survived, but in addition to that, he's a great, I don't want to say kid, he's a man, but he's a great young man. I mean, he has, for those of you that have seen him, you feel that when you're in his presence and when you hear him speak of how grateful he is. And I told him that day, I said, as amazing as your recovery has been, you're going to get to continue to play. You have a platform now that otherwise wouldn't have been given, and there's no doubt in my mind that you're gonna utilize that and do such great work. I mean, you already have in the short few months that you've been doing different things, and I believe that he will. So, what could have been a really tragic story, I think, has turned into something really positive, and a young man who's got a lot of gifts and a lot to give. Has now got the attention of the public, and he can give. So, really happy for him.
Troy, I appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome.
You're awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out.